Good afternoon, everyone. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep, can hear you.
Great. Good afternoon. I'm having some trouble, everyone, with my camera, so I may um, log out and log back in, but I certainly want to get started. I hope that everyone is doing well. Happy September to everyone. This is our first scheduled board meeting, whether committee or public meeting. I want to say since the start of the school year, so Happy New Year to everyone that is with us. But I don't want to belabor the time. I want to make sure that we get started and stick to our schedule. So we're going to open this meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee of the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. And we're going to get started with our first agenda item, which is the annual middle and high school choice processes and results for school year 21-22. So while that is coming up, good afternoon, Commissioner Chinya, Chair Emeritus. Good afternoon, Commissioner Reed.
Good afternoon.
So like I said, folks, I'm going to log out and come back in, but are we ready for the choice presentation?
Good morning, Commissioner. Good afternoon, Commissioner McFadden. Tina High Covered, Chief of Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment. And with us today, we have Dominic Bivens, who is our specialist managing our choice work. And so today he's going to present the presentation for you. Dominic, you have to share your screen, I believe, today for the presentation. So if you could go ahead and you could pull the presentation up, that'd be great. And just to give, we submitted a compliance report to the policy committee. We did have a bit of discussion with the policy committee about the choice results. So this is a similar presentation, but wanted to walk you through where we landed around placement in high schools and number of kids who went through choice and that kind of thing, so you get a full update. So Dominic will bring it up now, and I'll be here to answer questions if anybody has questions. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Chief. And just because we have a few other presentations and we've got to go through procurement today, I'd like for us to be as concise as possible with the presentation. I know the information is substantive, but I also know that there are commissioners that have questions about this information. So I want to make sure that we allow time for that. So if we can go through as concisely as possible, so that we can leave space for commissioners to actually engage in dialogue with staff.
Sounds good. Hit the high points, Dominic. You got this, sir.
All right, will do. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, commissioners and Teaching and Learning Committee. My name is Dominic Bivens. I'm a staff associate in the Office of Enrollment Choice and Transfer. And today I will be sharing with you our annual middle and high school choice process and results. So first, we're going to talk about the timeline and process for choice, the improved supports implemented for the 21-22 school year cohort, our targeted choice strategies, the process, participation, and results from the choice process for the 21-22 school year, and how we plan to move forward for the next cohort with our middle and high school choice process. The choice regarding the middle and high school choice process, we have aligned with district priorities 4 and 7 to effectively engage stakeholders, parents and families and caregivers, as well as continually work toward equity at all levels. For our early engagement strategies, we have choice liaisons at every school, and we encourage families at the 4th and 7th grade level to engage those choice liaisons, develop and understand students' interests and goals. And remember that tests and grades, particularly in the 4th and 7th grades, are a major factor in determining eligibility for our entrance criteria schools. But we start with our 3rd and 6th graders and engaging them, making sure they know about their various options and understanding the importance of grades and test scores. For our timeline, we start in October with our open house sessions for families, and that culminate in a choice fair that usually takes place the first week of December. This year, we had a virtual choice fair, which I will talk about more in this presentation. By the end of January, applications are due, and then families receive their decision letter the beginning of March regarding their placement. So the way that choice works is that students can select up to 5 schools, and they rank those schools based on their preference. And an algorithm is used to match students' preferences with schools with available seating. And this is over the past 3 years, we have been consistent in placing students at their first or second choice 65 to 75% of the time. In supporting families in the choice process, as I stated earlier, we have a choice liaison at every school that's trained by central office, and they provide families with information about the choice process and walk families through the process. We also provide support for those choice liaisons at every school at the district level. Given the challenges with the pandemic, we also had to revise composite scores and collaborate with various offices to develop the best possible scenario for our communities that we serve. We also hosted a virtual choice fair to ensure that families had access to information about our school options despite the pandemic. For the choice fair, we had about 20,000 visits to the choice fair virtual platform that was created, as well as we hosted multiple virtual town hall meetings for families to come and learn more about our schools and about the middle and high school choice process. We also offered a digital version of the guide as well as paper guides at various mill sites for families to access information about the school choice options we offer here in the district. Families were also able to submit an application online, and for the 21-22 school year, over 1,200 applications were submitted through Campus Portal. For the virtual choice fair, videos were produced by each of our choice sites, in which school leaders shared what made their school a great choice for families. And so I'm just going to share one of the videos briefly so that you guys can see the work that was done regarding the virtual choice fair. Give me 1 second.
Mr. Bivens, we can't hear the sound, the audio.
Thank you. I apologize.
I can, if the link is posted, I could try to share from my screen if that'll help. I don't know.
Yeah, 'cause I don't know. I'm not getting sound. I do apologize. So Ms. Gant, can you, the links are in the presentation.
Which one was it? Baltimore School for Young Women?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if it works for me.
Good grammar and spelling are important, but if you want to write essays that inspire, messages that forge brighter connections, and emails that get the job done,
I'm trying to find it.
you need to think about more than just grammar and spelling. Women.
Okay,
The pride of Baltimore
can everybody
City.
hear it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna show it this way then.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Reynolds, and I am the Director of Admissions and Student Affairs at the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women, the pride of Baltimore City, located in the heart of downtown Baltimore and affectionately known as Bliss. At Bliss, we are committed to preparing the young women of Baltimore City for success in college and life. Bliss engages all students in learning through a strong school culture and innovative teaching practice that nurtures the development of the whole young woman, emotionally, physically, and academically. Essentially, we work to create a well-rounded learning environment that tends to the needs of the whole girl and offer a rigorous instruction and leadership model that equip all students to transform Baltimore and beyond. The young women of Bliss demonstrate leadership at every level, self, school, and society. Bliss offers an exciting learning environment that lends so many opportunities to its students. Through experiential learning and critical conversations, our girls are fully equipped with cross-curricular learning. As an E-Gate school, we pride ourselves on the learning environment for our gifted and advanced students, while also meeting the needs of all students. We meet students where they are. Students have the opportunity to develop their Bliss Pride through athletics, 15 plus enrichment activities and clubs, internships, incentives, quarterly trips, our school house system, and so much more. The success rate of Bliss is undeniable. Bliss girls are taking Baltimore and beyond by storm, in and out of the classroom. At Bliss, 100% of our students are accepted to college, and we guarantee all of our girls support for at least 5 years after they graduate. In high school, our girls are the 3-time winners at the Baltimore City Step Competition, and our cheerleaders for both middle and high school are first place division champions in All-Star and Stomp and Shake HBCU style cheerleading. Our robotics team are the city champs at the VEX robotics competitions, and we have a rockin' Bliss band. This is only to highlight a small piece of what you can be a part of if you choose to apply at Bliss. Did I mention we offer our girls leadership training through internships and partnerships beginning in the 6th grade? And this has taken our girls as far as Colorado and even abroad. Bliss is a place where young women are nurtured, 6th through 12th grade, to become leaders in their communities and women who are ready to take on challenges and create reform. We are the place where young women will learn, lead, and transform Baltimore one young woman at a time.
Watch carefully.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gant. So again, that was just one of the videos that was used on the virtual platform to give families more information about the various school choice options that we offer here in the district. For the virtual choice fair, we did have families complete a survey to tell us how they were experiencing the virtual choice fair, its effectiveness, and almost half of the participants indicated that the school profiles on the website and the virtual choice fair platform were influential in helping them make their school selections. As stated earlier, ECT hosted multiple virtual information sessions in addition to the choice fair, where families could learn more about our middle and high school choice process, and this was streamed across multiple social media platforms. We also collaborated with the Office of College and Career Readiness to host virtual roundtable and CTE demonstration sessions for students to learn more about the individual school choice sites. For our middle school choice process, we have 5th graders placed in priority groups based on whether or not they live in an area that has a zone middle school. Those students that do not have a zone middle school are priority 1 group. And those students we encourage must participate in the middle school choice process in order to receive placement. But all of our 5th graders can participate, and those that do have a 6th grade middle school seat are considered our priority 2 group. For a middle school choice process, we use sibling and location preference in our placement process. We also expanded our middle school options to include additional K-8 sites for families to choose from. This year, the sites that were included were Walter P. Carter and Hampton Elementary Middle School. Some changes that were made for the 21-22 school year regarding our high school choice process were that Carver, Edmondson, and Mergenthaler no longer had an entrance criteria for students to enter and be placed at the school. We also had students complete a CTE interest survey as part of the high school choice application. Only one formula was used to calculate a student's composite score to determine eligibility for our entrance criteria high schools. And given the impact of COVID, attendance and standardized test scores were not used as part of the calculation of the composite score. When we talk about entrance criteria high schools, we're talking about the schools where tests and grades are needed in order to attend. That would be Poly City, Dunbar, and Western at our high school level, and our advanced academic programs in Waverly, Roland Park, Cross Country, Mount Royal, and Francis Scott Key. And again, we typically use grades and test scores and attendance to determine placement in those programs. Again, given the pandemic, test scores, were not used in the calculation of the composite score. So here you can see the revised formulas for the middle school advanced academics and high school entrance criteria placement. For the 21-22 school year cohort, we did receive slightly more applications, and we had an 89% participation rate amongst our eligible students. This was a testament to the hard work that our choice liaisons did in engaging families, even in the middle of a pandemic when students and families and staff were virtual. For placements, again, about 70% of students were placed at their first and second choice for the high school choice process. For our middle school choice process, we saw a dip in the number of applications received, which resulted in a slight increase in the participation rate among our students. And here we also see 70% of students receive their first and second choice in the middle school choice process. When we look at first choice assignments by race and ethnicity, we see that out of all the students that received their first choice, which was about 3,300 students, 73% of those students were African American that received their first choice, with 22% of white students receiving their first choice. Then we did see some disparities with this, considering that white students only represent about 7% of our overall population of students. When we look at the breakdown further by race and ethnicity, only about 49% of our African American students that participated in choice received their first choice, compared to our Asian and white communities, where 77% of Asian students that participated received their first choice, and 65% of white students that participated received their first choice. And here we have the breakdown by zip code, and we see that particularly in Northeast Baltimore, there are some disparities in regards to students receiving their first and second, their first choice, with about only 35 to 40% of students in that region of the city receiving their first choice. Lastly, this is just kind of a breakdown by zip code of students receiving their first choice by zip code, and we see Park Heights, Pimlico area has the highest number of students that receive their first choice. Additionally, when we look at compared to last year's students receiving their first choice placement, we see many of the same schools sending students to their first choice, with Roland Park being the highest, sending the highest number of students to their first choice. In addition to this the choice fair survey, there was also a choice application survey that we asked families to complete. And many of the families that participated in that survey rated their choice liaisons highly in supporting them in navigating the school choice process. As we move forward with our middle and high school choice process, we're looking at ways that we can engage families and support our school-based staff with making sure families have access to information, simplifying the process for family, and using our community relationship to leverage communication opportunities with families and students, and making sure that they have access to the information. This year, our office held a spring work group with various stakeholders. Over 60 internal and external stakeholders were invited, in which we discussed recommendations for the 22-23 cohort and beyond. Some of the things that were discussed were making the the entrance criteria process more equitable for students. We also discussed our middle school choice options and programming, as well as how to engage family and community in this choice process. Those recommendations were shared with Cabinet and will be shared with the public in the coming weeks regarding the recommendations that came out of those work group meetings. With that, I'm going to see if anybody has any questions or concerns. Again, I thank you for your time and allowing me to share about our middle and high school choice process this year.
Mr. Biven, I appreciate a couple of things. First, I appreciate you getting through that information so concisely. Thank you so much for that. And this is also quite a bit of information. I would like for the presentation to stay up for a few moments so that we can reference some of those slides. No worries, so that we can reference some of those slides as we're moving through. I see Commissioner Reed's hand up first. I want to go back to slide 28, if we can start there, Commissioner Reed.
Yeah.
28, there we go. Commissioner Reed?
Yeah, I guess I had a question. One was 28, and I look at schools, particularly Booker T. Washington, Westport, and Vanguard. Is this a situation, a chronic situation where they have tougher the placements than the other schools? And how do we remedy that? I just see that 2022 is going to be just like 2021 in terms of the fact that we may not use assessment scores, we may not use attendance. So could we see shortfalls at those schools because of the fact that the students aren't placed as well as the other schools?
Right. Well, certainly. So families rank their school preferences based on, what they want in a school. Regarding those three schools that you named, we did include them as part of the high school choice and middle and high school choice fair to give families more information about what's offered at the school. So that's part of the strategy, and just making sure that families are aware of what our various school options have to offer. And so that's been the strategy regarding those particular schools.
Can I just add in, though, it's important to note, Dominic, thank you for that, that we're talking about choice seats. So there's different ways that kids are placed in these schools, right, Commissioner Reed? So there are schools that have K through 5, that Booker T is their neighborhood, if you will, middle school. So if a family does not choose it as part of the choice process and they just go right over from their elementary school to Booker T. So what you're looking at is the number of kids who rank that and were placed there versus the total population that's actually at that school. I just want to make sure you're clear about that. There are other kids that are entering in, not through the choice process, but because Booker T is part of a zone, if you will, of kids who have already sort of neighborhood admittance into the school.
I mean, but I guess my point is, people choose entities because they fit a certain need or they're pretty popular. So what's the shortfalls in those schools that make them less popular and not a choice?
I mean, honestly, that's not something that our team can answer. That's a school's team question. I mean, we can pontificate on it and we can say what parents have said. I think there is wide reaching perspective from families about which schools are quality and which aren't. Dominic and I have been meeting with the academics team from Dennis Jutras and Laurel Hannion to talk about expanding middle school honors options, for example, at more schools and building the capacity of those schools to offer, for example, honors programming so that those schools become more attractive. Because right now the perception is for a lot of families, if I don't get into an advanced academic program in one of the schools that Dominic had earlier in the presentation, I'm at a loss, right? And what we want to offer them is we actually have a lot of different options for middle schools that are fantastic, that offer a wide variety of programming in them. So to speak about those specific couple schools, we'd have to have the schools office sort of comment on that, about sort of what's going on there. But I do know that Booker T this year has I went there the very first day school opened, exciting brand new first year principal who's going to be there managing the school, right? And I'm excited about what's to come. But you know, some schools have had a legacy of being plagued with not being successful, and so parents aren't making that as a primary option for them for their children.
Thank you.
Chief Davis, I see your hand.
Yeah, just to follow up with what Chief High Covered said. I mean, it is a perception of quality. Sometimes it is true, sometimes it is not, and just kind of signals more work that we have to do. So I don't think there's anything more that the school's office would add, except for what Chief High Covered said, that some of the schools are not perceived in the way that we would want them to be, and we have more work to do. Chief High Covered mentioned Principal Ford going into the school and already beginning to kind of reignite the school, but we know we have a long way to go.
Thank you.
Commissioner Reed, did you have anything else? Have another question?
Yeah, I guess the other was page 23. Keep in mind, everyone, that I'm new to this committee, and I'm not an academic by training, so it's more of a learning process than the rest of my committee members. Looking at middle school and high school criteria, the criteria you have for 2021 is understandable, where you're going to focus less on assessments and attendance. But how does that manifest in terms of the whole idea of whole harmless and the ramifications to the schools in terms of how they see their populations changing?
Sure. So part of the recommendations that were submitted for the 22-23 cohort was to look at that piece around attendance and assessment scores and how they're weighed in the formula. Right now, the assessments are weighed 50% in the composite score formula, and attendance is weighed 25%. For the last few years, we've held students harmless for attendance, as our current system does not distinguish between unexcused and excused absences. And so this was not fair to students that might have chronic illness or might be off for religious holidays. So that's why students were held harmless given the attendance piece. And for the assessment piece, because students didn't take assessments last year, it was not included as part of the calculation of the composite score.
So there's no dissonance with the schools in terms of how it changes their population or the way they evaluate students?
I mean, so that has yet to be seen. This would be the first cohort going into the schools where assessments weren't used as part of the calculation of the composite score.
What I would just offer, Commissioner Reed, is that we did a crosswalk between principals, parents, district office staff, every office you can think of, to weigh into the alternative strategy we proposed for choice for last year to make sure we were being thoughtful and inclusive in the decision of that process. We are now getting ready to propose. We've done the same thing with the upcoming choice formula for this school year. We'll be preparing for next school year. And once cabinet approves the final, we'll be happy to send that out. But we did do a cross section of folks to weigh in on it and look and see if the revised formula makes sense. But understanding being in a pandemic, we didn't have much to go with. We didn't have test scores. We didn't have attendance was spotty. We didn't even the fourth quarter of that year, if you remember correctly, we didn't even give kids different grades. They either got a bonus if they were improving in that quarter. And if they didn't, their third quarter grades stood as their semester grades. So we also held kids harmless during the last quarter of when schools closed and didn't have technology or access to resources and that kind of thing. So really being thoughtful about what's best for students, but also getting the feedback and weighing in from other folks across the school community.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem, Commissioner Chinya. Chair Emeritus, do you have any thoughts?
And I want to apologize because I had a technical problem, and so in the portion I sort of was not there. But the question that I have is really around the high school, and I don't necessarily recall a slide, but just an overview of any differences that we've seen, especially with the schools where we removed the entrance criteria.
So in terms of placements, we did see where we would normally have some seats in second round at Carver and Edmondson in particular, at some of the trades. Those three schools immediately filled from the first round of the choice process and had active wait lists throughout the summer. In terms of academic, anything to that nature, that again remains to be seen, as this is the first cohort of students that did not have an entrance criteria going into the school.
Okay, so it sounds like it was a more rounded experience for some of the students in terms of their ability to enter those schools.
Right.
Okay. That was the biggest question that I had. I think the others I understood pretty well. So thanks a lot.
No problem.
For some of us, I think it's important for us to, Commissioner Reed, do you have another question?
No, I was just wondering where BSA falls. Baltimore School for the Arts.
So Baltimore School of Arts has an audition process, so it's not part of this formal process, and does not go on our formal application regarding school placements because of that audition piece.
Thank you.
So that's not something our office governs.
Thank you.
But to that point, though, I think it would be important for us to see, for example, where students are coming from, the different schools that students are coming from, perhaps from middle school. Are they coming from Twigs? What is the demographic breakdown of students that are going into BSA? I think that will also be helpful information for commissioners just to have as we think about the choice process in general. Is that something that we can include moving forward?
Sure.
Yeah, we can certainly ask them to provide that data for us because they collect it. So we can certainly ask for that and share it when we see the data back to you.
Yeah, I think it's important. Thank you. I think that's important for us to know. But for us, I want to, because we talked about how the entrance criteria has been taken away from a few schools, Carver, Mervo, Edmondson. And I just want us to be reminded of the college and career readiness plan, the audit that took place, the reasons why we made that decision. I think that should be lifted in this discussion right now, just for the sake of the discussion and for all of us. So can someone just touch on that a little bit? Because when people see that we've taken the criteria entrance away, I think some of us know why, some of us remember, but just for the sake of folks that may be watching and listening, and also for some of our commissioners newer to the committee, I think it's important for us to just touch on that just a little bit.
Would you like me to jump in, Tina?
Sure, Rachel, please. I was going to ask Don if you wanted to, but please. Thank you.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, Rachel Pfeiffer, Executive Director of College and Career Readiness. So as Commissioner McFadden mentioned, we made the decision looking at quite a bit of data and recognizing that what we were finding was happening was that our CTE, career and technical education programs, were not being made available to as wide a group of students as could be successful in them because of the entrance criteria at Carver, Edmondson, and Mervo. Mergenthaler. And so as a result, and because of our desire to give access to high wage, high skill training in those CTE courses to a range of students, including students who might have disabilities, including a whole range of students who, for some reason or another, maybe they came into the district later for a variety of reasons, were not meeting those composite scores. We opened it up more broadly. I'll also note that the State Department of Education had taken a specific look at the entrance criteria at those schools, because those schools have programming that in some cases is unique to those schools. You couldn't find it at another school in the district. And so they had flagged for us a concern, which we took very seriously, about violating students, the rights of a variety of groups of students by creating barriers in access to those schools. I hope that's helpful.
I appreciate that clarification, Dr. Pfeiffer. Does anyone have any questions about that before we move on? Okay. I want to know what supports are in place for our special education students as it relates to the choice process. Are there any different supports, any extra supports? Where do our special education students fall within the choice process? Just curious.
Sure. So the first and foremost support for all of our students is with the choice liaison, and they often work in collaboration with the IEP chairs at the individual schools to determine best placements for students. And it really depends on their IEPs and their needs, and the schools that can service those needs. But that collaboration happens between choice liaison, the IEP team, and the families to determine best placements for the populations of students.
What I will also offer though, Dominic, is, and I see Dr. Brooks raised her hand, is that the special ed department has been working really closely, even during the summer transfer window and placements of new enrollments with the ECT to make sure that we have the appropriate placements for students. And I just appreciate their intentional partnership to make sure we find the right spaces for kids and that they have equal access. And I'll let Dr. Brooks share more about that relationship.
So thank you, Chief High Coverage. You kind of answered what I was going to say. So the Office of Special Education works very closely with Enrollment Choice and Transfer during this process and during all processes when we have any families that are newly enrolling into the district or students that are transferring between schools that are receiving specially designed instruction. And so we review those IEPs to ensure that those accommodations will be in place for whatever school that they're enrolling in. And then during this process, working very closely with the choice liaisons, the IEP chairs, the school counselors, and the families, so that we can ensure that students are having the same opportunities as their typical peers to be able to participate in this choice process and to be able to attend any of our city schools.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Brooks, for that. Thank you to the team for that. I know that Commissioner Griffin had to step away. I just want to see if you made it back yet, Commissioner Griffin. I know that Commissioner Griffin had a question about Black students getting their first choice and their second choice for high school. Yep, I think it's slide 29 or 20, yep, 30 and 29. So I'm not sure exactly where she was kind of headed with that, but just to raise that, because I'm sure she'll send a question in about it, she wanted to mention that. And then I want to go to the final slide, not the final one, but 36. Yeah, so moving forward, and we believe in city schools. So what happens if students don't have a positive experience with the choice process, or families don't necessarily have a positive experience with it? They may not get their choices or something. How do we factor that into this particular slide, this information here?
Sure. So with the choice process itself, we have 2 rounds. We have the first round where students make their school selections, and then we have a second round for students to participate if they don't receive their choice in the first round, or they want another school selection. We also have our summer transfer window where families come in and request other placement options. Um, Part of the challenge that we have in regards to the process is the seat availability at schools and matching that with family and student preference for placement at schools. It was mentioned earlier about popularity of programming in schools and programs and things of the like. So that's ongoing work and how we can make sure more students are getting into their first and second choice. Part of that is making sure family students know what the different schools offer. Part of that is the work of the choice liaison to make families aware of their options and what the schools have to offer, and helping families to make informed choices.
Thank you. So I know we do the choice fairs, and all of this is great information. I'm just curious to know, like, when do we start the articulation process in middle school? Is it just the choice fair that we rely on, or is there like an ongoing articulation of programs for students so that they're not waiting the year before it's time for them to apply, perhaps, but they kind of are working towards specific schools and programs a little earlier on, so that they have a clear understanding of where they're going to go, if I'm making sense?
No, certainly. And I think we spoke about that earlier in the presentation around our early engaging families earlier in those third and fourth grade for middle school and 6th and 7th grade for high school. Because by the time you get to 8th grade or you get to 5th grade, in terms of what schools you're eligible for, it's kind of already set in stone. And so we want families to know earlier in the process when their children are in 3rd grade, 6th grade, and know, hey, this process is coming up. And again, we depend on the choice liaisons to engage families, and we use the choice fair to engage families early in the process and not have it just for our 5th and 8th graders, but for students from 3rd through 8th as they move through like you said, matriculate through elementary and middle school, and making sure that they're informed about this process.
Thanks. Commissioner Chinya?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that a part of that articulation still does include things like walk through, like shadow days and walkthroughs.
Saturdays, open house.
Of the schools are partnering with the middle school, so students are having opportunities to, and now I know with the pandemic things have changed and some are virtual, but those things still do take place as a part of the early articulation.
And if Dr. Pfeiffer is still here, I don't know if she doesn't mind me calling on her, as part of the R3 work that we were planning, there are some intentional work to be done around career exposure for middle school students, right? And to get exposure to our high school programming as part of our work as well. So Dr. Pfeiffer, if you would just mention that briefly about what the R3 plan includes to then encourage more middle school exploration, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the commitments that we have made is a college visit for every 6th grader, a visit to a CTE classroom for every 7th grader, and then a job shadow for every 8th grader. I'd specifically focus on the 7th graders and that visit to a CTE classroom, which may end up being virtual, right? We're going to build up over the years, but what we recognized is that we wanted to commit to every student being able to get access to see what those classrooms look like, to understand the range of things that they could learn within our various CTE programs across the city, and then use that as a kind of in living color way to inform the choice process that they'll engage in the following year, without having to just look at a list that might say carpentry or automotive or computer science or engineering and not really have a sense of what that actually means. So that's one of the commitments that we're making. And again, ensuring that every student gets it, not just those whose schools are organized to coordinate it.
Thank you, Dr. Pfeiffer. Colleagues, are there any additional questions or clarifying thoughts or pondering thoughts?
No, thank you.
Great. I appreciate the work of the team, this team on this, and Mr. Bivens for, seems like you've been taking some of the lead on this. So I just want to just say thank you. And we'll keep monitoring this process. I think it's important for us to track and see now that we've altered the criteria, right, or the composite score, or we've altered some things this year. I'm curious to see how that plays out over the next couple of years. So thank you all for this work. And we're looking forward now to an update on the R3.
Thank you all for having me this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, Commissioner McFadden. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I'm Joan Dabrowski, Chief Academic Officer. I'm excited to bring to the board this afternoon a presentation on some of our early work in Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine. I've got a team of colleagues here to help us go through. I will be efficient with our time, and let's jump right in. So the goal for this afternoon is for us to share, I think, first to sort of anchor our work in our data and give a sense of where that data has informed where we are starting in these early weeks of school. I'll quickly remind the committee about some of the professional learning work we have been doing to get ready for this implementation. And then I'm really excited that we're going to have some colleagues here to talk about two particular areas of the R3 work that is happening right now in our schools. So some work around wellness, school culture, and climate, and then some work in personalized learning, specifically the work of our student learning plans. And then we'll wrap up with a quick preview of what's going to come in our next R3 update. And so with that, I want to just remind all of us around how our work aligns with our board strategic priorities. So as we think about today's presentation and about that professional learning I'm going to highlight, and then as we dig into wellness, school culture, climate, and personalized learning, you can see where those map on to the strategic priorities. So just want to make sure we name that as always part of our work when we come to the committee. And so with that, I'm going to actually pass to my colleague, Chief Teresa Jones, who's going to provide for us some of the data that's informing our work this fall.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief Dabrowski, and good afternoon, everyone. We can move to the next slide. So first, let me just say that the data that we're reviewing here was also used in the actual R3 plan that was submitted and posted on our website. And it does provide a foundational understanding of circumstances as we ended the year. So first, as relates to attendance, what you'll note here is that we've broken out attendance for all grades with the blue line, and then we've broken it out by grade band as well. What you'll probably notice right away is that there's a big dip in what you see for school year 2021. That's somewhat unsurprising, largely because of the conversion of in-person learning to virtual learning during that period. However, I do want to note that that is a very drastic drop, particularly for the high school students, where we were starting to make some significant gains when it comes to increasing attendance for that group, which historically has had the lowest level of attendance. Next slide, please. Also, as we take a look at the last year, we want to take a look at grades. And as you will recall, we did make a policy change towards the end of the year to address the fact that there was unfinished learning that needed to be reflected. And so we introduced the use of the NC code, which was to indicate either no completion or no credit, depending on the grade level. And what you'll note here is that we do have percentages that range from 30% to close to 60% when it comes to the percentage of those NC grades as it relates to those grade levels. I'll just note here that as we take a look at this, this is really important information, partly because as we start the new school year, we are referring to the needs of these students as we think about our acceleration of learning strategies. And so you'll see that reflected as we talk more about the R3 activities that are underway. Next slide. Also, as it relates to assessment activity, so what you'll see here, we're going to talk about our diagnostic assessment. First is the Dibbles 8 assessment, which is our foundational literacy assessment that we use for students in kindergarten through 5th grade. A couple things as you take a look at these charts. So first, I want to note that the charts at the top and the blue are intended to give us the percentage of students that are considered at or above benchmark. And that basically gives us a sense of what we would consider to be on grade level or proficient, if you will. And what we do here in the first table is we take a look at the grades of kindergarten through second grade students. And you'll see that we, obviously over time, over the course of the year, from beginning of year to middle of year to end of year, we tend to see steady increases. One of the things to note is that for school year 1920, we did not administer the end of year assessment, partly because of the virtual transition due to the pandemic. You'll also see for school year 2021 only, you'll see grades K through 5. That is because we made an assessment strategy shift to include the use of this assessment for students in grades 3 through 5. And so what you'll see there again is that what you would expect, which is an increase over time. The thing that I also want to note, though, is that in that bottom set of charts, there's also that percentage of well below students. And the whole idea there is we wanted to see decreases in those numbers. And the idea there is we've covered both ends of the spectrum. And so one of the things we want to note here is while the trends are similar to what we've seen historically, they're not at the degree that we typically see. And that is largely because of the disruptions due to COVID, and is very consistent what we've seen in the national data provided for DIBELS 8. Next slide. The second diagnostic assessment that we use is called the iReady assessment. This computer adaptive assessment is used for both reading and mathematics. So I'm going to review two charts here. So first, when we take a look at our reading data, looking at middle grade performance as it relates to that end of year data, we have a couple of additional points of context. And so what I will sort of review here is that as you take a look at grades 6, 7, and 8, you will see bars that compare our results as Baltimore with two other peer groups. So one is the Council of Great City Schools, so that's CGCS. And then there's also a peer group comparison that we refer to as the Urban Collaborative, which is a smaller set of peer districts, for example, Detroit, Memphis, and some others. And so what we note here is that while you'll see that fewer of our students are performing on grade level, we had more students that were performing below grade level regardless of the testing environment, and that was similar when it comes to student performance in grades 7 to 8 as we compare results with that urban cohort. So again, when we think about what does it mean to be on grade level, you really should take a look at the two different green bars. So you'll see there that our green bars combined tend to be a little bit shorter than what you see for the other comparisons. And then when we take a look at the red bars, those two bottom red bars, ours tends to be a bit higher. So it just indicates that we had some additional challenges in Baltimore that were not expressed when we compare ourselves to our peer group. Next slide, please. So as it relates to mathematics, here we're showing the results for our kindergarten through 8th graders. Again, for comparison purposes, we're going to use as a reference point the urban cohort, so that urban collaborative. Once again, the difference here is we're taking a look at sort of like, well, what about improvement over time? And so in this case, we're looking at a comparison of the fall 2021 results to spring 2021. So that sort of gives us a sense around like, are our students, growing at a similar rate to that peer group? And so again, as you take a look at the green bars, you do see increases in green from fall to spring. We would all expect to see that. And we also see decreases in the red. So again, those are the things that we would want to see. However, we would want to see it at an accelerated rate in order to ensure that our students are not going to fall farther behind. And so the key takeaway here is that while we do have similar decreases when it comes to those red bars versus that comparison group, we weren't as successful in getting students to those green bars as that urban cohort comparison group. So as it relates to how this frames our discussion around the R3 plan, a couple of key takeaways. Number one, the data does show that our students experienced unfinished learning in ways that were manifested both in terms of their assessment performance as well as their academic performance as measured by grades. And it also shows that, no surprise, some of the attendance challenges are a direct factor in contributing to those results. So you will see in our strategies going forward that we will look to address attendance, engagement, ways that we can hold on to our kids and address their learning needs based on what these assessments tell us, and to do it with strategies to accelerate that rate of learning moving forward. So with that, I will turn it back to Chief Dabrowski.
Thank you so much, Chief. So I do want to take a moment on the heels of looking at those slides to just call out from the academic space of looking closely at our end of year data from the previous school year and acknowledge that most of our students remained in a distance learning, remote learning, virtual learning space. And we know that as we have made a commitment to return to in-person learning and have talked a lot about our safety and health mitigation strategies to keep kids safe in buildings, I also want to acknowledge the academic imperative of having our children in person. The work we can do with our students in person is right now got to be something that we hold as a key part of our priorities, knowing that for most of our students, the remote learning was not the right match. And so I say that knowing that while we have the concerns and worries about staying safe and in our in-person, we are continuing to know that our health and safety pieces are solid and strong. And I also want to add a layer to the academic side and importance of that being in person. So I just want to take a moment just to name that as we think about the work we are doing right now in this early R3 implementation. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to go through quickly. We talked about this before. I shared it at a recent board meeting as well. As we prepared to welcome students back, we spent a lot of time this summer in professional learning experiences to again get ready for this important moment. And so just to highlight on the next slide for our school leaders, we continued to meet throughout the summer in what we called our school readiness stat sessions, which happened each week throughout July. We had a leadership institute in early August, followed by an operations institute in mid-August, followed by our CEO Institute the 18th through the 20th. So lots of opportunities to come together and think about this work of reconnect, restore, and reimagine for our school leaders. For our teachers and our school-based staff, a similar cadence began with our new Teacher Institute in mid-August, followed by Special Education Institute, and then are welcoming back on the week of August 24th for, again, a lot of that school-based professional learning to, again, get folks really going around this reconnect, restore, reimagine. And so with that, we wanted to be here today to talk about some early implementation. So on the next slide, you'll see where in our R3 plan, we have sort of this roadmap of how we're going about this work. I just want to bring your eyes to the low section of this slide where it says key strategies and show you where we are in our map as we jump into the presentation today, which is we're going to look closely at wellness, school culture, and climate, and personalized learning. These two strategies are alive and kicking in our schools right now, and that's where we're gonna jump right now. And I'm thrilled to be able to pass this presentation over to our wellness, school culture, and climate team. I believe I am passing it on to Dr. Sarah Warren, correct?
It's Katia Stokes. I'm going to be here for Dr. Warren.
Welcome, Katia.
Well, thank you. I forgot I can at least take it off when I'm in by myself with the door closed. So good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here. So as Dr. Dabrowski said, we are well into our wellness, school culture, and climate work, and I'm excited to give you just a brief update in terms of what the work has looked like for us over the past few weeks. Next slide, please. So we started this work asking ourselves, what do we want our schools to look like, feel like, and sound like? And it became quite apparent that we needed to have a shared understanding as well as some clear commitments. What became very clear about is culture is a description of the way we do things, and climate is how we feel when we do them. In addition to establishing that definition, we thought it was very important that we also identify the shared language and the key domains that embody what we feel or what we believe to be necessary to create the vibrant, welcoming, and joyful school communities that we envision. So the 9 domains that you see here on the screen are based upon national standards, and they're also based upon some of the feedback and input from our district and school leaders. So what does our commitment look like to this thus far? So I'm going to share just 3 ways we've done this commitment. One has been to provide a stipend. All traditional schools were able to get a stipend for 5 to 10-month staff to come back early to support them with plan development. Secondly, we took the steps to make sure that this plan was embedded within our school performance plan and make sure that there was clear alignment there. Lastly, we make sure we took the time to provide district-wide training for teachers as well as our leaders to establish, again, a common language and an understanding of culture and climate. Next slide, please. So each school's plan had to identify 3 to 5 domains. The 2 domains had to be inclusive of both high quality stakeholder experience and nurturing relationships and well-being. The domain of high quality stakeholder experience recognizes our commitment to providing exceptional service to all, demonstrating a high degree of professionalism, and ensuring that all who are part of our school community feel acknowledged, seen, valued, and respected from day 1 to day 180. The domain of nurturing relationships and well-being recognizes our commitment to creating relationship-centered schools, which center on developing and sustaining positive connections, trust, and community, and establishing systems as well as structures to support the academic, social, emotional, and mental health of both staff and students. We all know that it's not enough just to create a plan. There must be intentionality and commitment to revisiting and to continuous improvement. Our district leaders, which is inclusive of ILEDs, as well as our wholeness team, has started the process of providing feedback on plans, and we will continue to provide feedback on plans, and schools will update their progress on plans at key checkpoints throughout the school year. In addition to this, schools will receive funding in the amount of $10,000 to support implementing either a goal or one of the action steps that has been identified in their plan. Next slide, please. So almost immediately after culture and climate was identified as a key priority, we started to work on not only discussing what culture and climate means, but doing the work to create the type of culture that we want to see and feel, not only in our schools, but amongst ourselves as leaders. We started this work during our summer stat. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Brené Brown, but we did a series that really focused on her topic of trust and the anatomy of trust as the foundation of establishing relationships. We did a series first starting on self-awareness for us as leaders, then secondly, delving into that braving from Brené Brown. And then lastly, spending time really digging deeply into, so what do these domains mean? What do they look like? What are examples of what they would look like, feel like, and sound like in our schools? And how do we see them coming alive in our schools? So we wanted to make sure that not only did we have that shared language, but there was also a familiarity and commonality for how we can see them come alive in our schools. Next slide, please. In addition to our leaders, we wanted to make sure that our teachers as well had shared language and common understanding. So as part of our commitment to providing regular opportunities for connection and that relationships in its schools, all students will have the protected time in their schedule for advisory as well as morning meeting. Both advisory and morning meeting are engaging ways to build a strong sense of community and to prepare students for the day, both socially and emotionally. Schools receive guidance for structuring and scheduling advisory as well as morning meetings. And teachers received the first 30 days toolkit, which provided written activities for both morning meeting and advisories, and strategies on best practices for instituting morning meeting as well as advisory. Our wholeness team has made a commitment to work in collaboration with our College and Career Readiness Office to provide written activities for both morning meeting and advisory for our teachers throughout the school year. For the first quarter, the focus will be on relationship building and community building. After the second quarter, advisory will encompass both a focus on SEL and college and career planning. Next slide. I believe that's it from me. Yes, and I will turn it over to another one. I turn it back over to you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. And again, just a huge acknowledgement to the work of the wholeness team throughout the summer, and again, supports for leaders, support for our teachers, all in service of students. So just really, really exciting work. At this point, I'm really excited to pass the conversation over to Dr. Rachel Pfeiffer, who will help us dig into the work around personalized learning and our student learning plans.
Thanks so much, Dr. Dabrowski. I'm really excited to share about how we're thinking about students learning this year, specifically how we personalize it for our young people and what those plans will look like. So as part of the work done as a result of some of the R3 feedback, families and community members, we developed a student learning plan that will be completed for every student, pre-K through 12. And the opportunity here for us is really creating a document that isn't just about a piece of paper, but it's about conversations between our students, between their families and their teacher, to be able to hear from students about what is important to them, about the strengths that they have, about how their learning has been thus far, to hear from parents who we know are the experts on their young people, and to be able to partner with the teacher in their learning process. So what we have right now is, as I mentioned, a student learning plan. We have engaged with our schools over the summer, and want to thank colleagues, Principal Ben Mosley at Glenmount and Jamila Laforte, a teacher at Cecil Elementary, who are representing a broader group of Jamila's representing a broader group of teachers who supported us in the development of this. Principal Mosley coming from the school leader perspective, and I want to thank Hannah Chauvin, who is a graduate fellow from Harvard's Graduate School of Education, who all came together to help support this summer. We provided training for all of our teaching staff on August 24th and 26th, and created a cadence in which these plans will be completed in the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year, to really capture the development of goals collectively between teachers, students, and parents, and the tracking of those goals over the course of the year. You can go to the next slide, please. So just to ground this in what we're actually talking about, I want to give you a chance to see kind of what this looks like. Part one is really understanding, hearing from our young people about what's important to them, who's in their family, how do they know that their teachers care about them. I really appreciate Katia's previous words and thinking about the culture that we want to create in our communities. And part of that is engaging our students in being able to tell us about them and what's important to them. Families also have the opportunity, as I mentioned, as the experts on their child, to be able to share their students' strengths and really ground this learning in what they know their students are able to do and how they'd like to see their students grow as well. In the second section, we're looking at the needs of our young people, how we can support them, and what kind of goals that they want to set and work on. We're focused on both academic goals, and in some cases, there may be a goal that's a social emotional goal. We really want to make sure that we are connecting with where our students are and how they and their families and the teacher all work together to see them grow over the year. We then, in part three, have the interventions, the supports that are going to be personalized to this young person, really thinking through, given what we know about them in the first sections of the plan, given the data that we've looked at, the diagnostics that we have, the things that they've said they want to focus on and that their families have weighed in on. What are we going to put in place to support that young person toward their goals? And then how will families be an active part in them? This is not just about what happens at school. This is about a full experience for a young person who is a whole person who doesn't spend their whole time at school. And then finally, just thinking through making sure that this participation is documented and that we're creating a culture where young people and their families and the school all come together to move forward toward this goal. Next slide, please. So in this work, the way it will actually roll out is that we will have an individual, most likely a teacher, who is a navigator who's actually supporting those conversations between the young person and the family, and kind of pulling it all together. And we'll also have ambassadors at the school level, student learning plan ambassadors who are really excited. We're hearing from many of them now. They volunteered in many cases. They're excited to jump in and support this work at the school level. They're the champions. They're the cheerleaders. They're the ones who are saying, look, we know this is new. We know this is something that's different, but this is an incredible opportunity for us to really come together and think through how we can focus our attention on providing personalized supports for our young people. And on that note, I will actually, if we go to the next slide, we can just talk a little bit about the time and what it actually looks like. So we know that time is one of our most precious resources. And so what we did in developing these plans was to think through the available time during the school day that teachers would have to be able to work with students on that About Me section, for instance. There's personalized learning blocks that our schools are now using as part of their schedule. There's advisory, as Katia mentioned earlier, that's being used. And again, many teachers are already doing this as part of the beginning of the year introductions with their students. We know that many of our teachers already have things planned out, and so they're incorporating these student learning plan questions into some of their getting to know you work with students in their classes. What we've also done is we protected time for teachers on September 24th, a professional development day that we said, look, we understand that you need time to work on these plans. Your diagnostic data will have come in at that point. Let's go ahead and block off this time so that our teachers can take that day to work on these plans, to connect with families, however they choose to use it to make progress on these student learning plans, they'll be able to do that. We also added we identified the half day on October 6th that will allow for parent-teacher conferences, for time to really engage families in some of these conversations. We also, one of the wonderful things about having teachers as part of the development team in this was we really leaned on their creative thinking to think through where there might be times during the school day, during the school year, that could be used for this. And there were myriad options that they shared as well, many that differ school by school. Next slide, please. So I'm going to end with this and then pass it over to my colleagues. Just wanted to give you a sense of when these plans will be completed. So for any families listening, by the end of the first quarter, November 4th, we want those beginning of year plans done. So we allotted the whole first quarter to work on the development of those plans, the student family section, the goals development, the interventions, and how everyone will support. The middle of year will be done by March 14th and the end of year by June 3rd. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Principal Mosley and Ms. Fort to share, really to bring this to life. You got the dry version from me, but I want them to share a little bit more about their experience with these plans.
Thank you, Dr. Pfeiffer. And thank you, everyone, for having me this evening. My name is Dr. Benjamin Mosley, principal at Glenmount Elementary Middle School. And I believe that Rachel really brought it full circle in the meaning that these student learning plans give us a vessel in order to drive our students through their learning, not just for this year, but future years and beyond. And when creating these plans, we're really guided by principles. Principles that we thought of and sought after as far as like relationship building, making sure that we continue to have students or build relationships with not just the students, but also with parents. The plans were built to have equity in them. Student-based, meaning that they are student-centered. The students will own these plans And that is the beauty of it all, because the students themselves have a lot of say in the plans. As being a building administrator and already beginning the process and bringing it to life, the students are saying, wow, this is the first time that I actually get the opportunity to state how I feel, to tell you who I am outside of the test score, to actually tell you what my future goals are. And it's powerful, and I know that it can be powerful, and we're looking to see further our students' chances, both inside the schoolhouse as well as outside the schoolhouse. Its intention is to be sustainable, again, meaning that it's not just a one-year form or sheet or a task to do, but the intention is for this to follow the students from where they are. Many of our students travel from school to school. Many of our students will matriculate from the younger grades on through 12. And it's important to capture that information as they matriculate throughout schools, to see their progress, see their goals change, to see their academic coursework change, and hopefully see them change as they become college, career, and community ready. So as a building administrator, my staff is on it. They're happy to see it. And we all know that even though we may call it additional work, but it's needed work, it's necessary work. And it allows us to ground the work and again, build relationships. And most importantly, going back to that student voice and even that parent voice allows us to capture that and engage them in their students' learning and their students' goals. So thank you, Rachel, for your time, and I'll pass it over to Ms. Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley, and hello, everyone. I am Jamila Laforte. I am a multi-classroom lead through opportunity culture at Cecil Elementary Schools. My 5th year here. I formerly was the 5th grade math and science teacher, and this is my 9th year with the city, and I've been so honored to work on such a diverse team. It's my first team that I've really worked on that was well-rounded with teacher skill sets and ideology, working with a principal, district office, a consultant who's done the research. So I think that working on this team has really brought to life a well-rounded product. For us as teachers, we spent a lot of time developing the plan in our work groups, going back and forth. And every time we came up with an idea, we knew that there was a double edge to it. So we said, okay, these are really the most important things that we want. We want to know our students. We want the family engagement. We do want some accountability with the data. We want everyone to be a part of this process, feel valued, and feel like they're going to accomplish something as a team. We just came back from 18 months off of the pandemic, and we don't know our kids. I'm in school, and I know every child in here, and they recognize me, but I don't even recognize them anymore. And they've changed so much. We've changed so much. But really, I've assumed the role of the teacher lead, and as someone who believes firmly in staying connected to the work, no matter where I go in my career in leadership, I think it's super important that we've been listening so much to teachers. This whole thing as a teacher team is to always stay connected to the teachers, listen, and make the appropriate changes that are needed based on the feedback. So one major issue that has been brought up multiple times amongst teachers is this issue of time. And it's been really hard to communicate to teachers that they do have time without sounding condescending, without sounding like it's easier than it makes it seem, without sounding like sometimes in buildings they might have leadership that really isn't or can't make that time. But what we did find in our survey responses that nearly over 80% of teachers said that they felt, almost 90% of teachers felt like they were going to be strongly supported in their schools with this work. So as our teacher pioneers, myself, Sydney Thomas, Rayshana, Sidnor, and Tamara, and a couple of teachers at my school, were pioneering these suggested strategy timelines. Like Mr. Mosley said, this is the first iteration of the SLP. We plan to reiterate it so that it's something that's fully functional, fully effective. And right now we're in the phases of try, big word for me, and what I've been trying to let my teachers know throughout the district, that this is something that we want to do, and we want to do it with fidelity. There's already a lot of kickback and pushback. We can't already. We want to make it a growth mindset. So as a teacher, okay, with my students are always going to tell me they can't. They're going to be frustrated. I've still got to reflect back on myself. okay, if that's what they're saying, how do I support them or help, change their perceptive of what it is? So I came up with a timeline that we're using currently at my school. I know Sydney's using something similar, but we are having these strategies. We do plan to share with teachers our strategies for timelines. The biggest section is the About Me section, and it only needs to be done once in the year. So once that section is actually done, getting in new data, we have to take the diagnostics, we take iReady, we take Amplify, we take Achieve 3000. That's nothing new. And for some teachers, it is new communicating that data. So I thought thoroughly, and I'm like, all right, here's a strategy at our school. iReady Dibbles window. iReady window opened yesterday. The Dibbles window actually opens a little later than this. But at our school, we're planning to have all of our testing done by September 23rd. That way, and the About Me section. So what we've been doing is Dr. Dabrowski says, hey, as a coach, I don't have to start my learning cycle right now. The acceleration model for math has been modified significantly, where some of my teachers really only have 2 math lessons to teach a week if they so want to do that, based on if they want to do review the next day, small group. There is time to at least engage in that About Me section, having morning meetings. I've been using 45, beginning next week, we're using 45 minutes of our academic planning time, where teachers would be expected to sit and talk about data. We're going to take that 45 minutes of time to make sure that those About Me sections are done. And then on the 24th, we have an entire day of PD where we are able to now do a couple of things. If you're an overachiever teacher like me, my data is going to be in. I'm probably calling parents all day to get that parent section completed. Otherwise, on 9/24, we intend to use that time to get the data in, start thinking about interventions that we can suggest to parents as we collaborate with those conversations, and then continue to do so by contacting parents that day. And on that half day on the 6th, and so in reality, our school essentially is intending to be done with the SLPs by October 6th, an entire month before they're even due. So we're going to be sharing these strategies with teachers. We shared timelines with them in our PD. My big thing just going on and through this individualized learning plan process is to be that connection from central office to the teacher leads team and putting every support I can in place for them, taking their feedback. 90% of teachers said they want another PD day, maybe possibly later in the year to work on this. Cool. Dr. Dabrowski, we might need to take a half day to support SLP work. Great, and it'll happen, Teachers said that they really would appreciate ongoing PD. We already set up SLP ambassadors. I wrote the writing the menu proposal to make sure that those SLP ambassadors are actually getting AUs for their work. We've had, I think we had 90 SLP ambassadors volunteer after our PD on our second day of PD, and that was only out of 600 people that filled out that exit ticket survey. So we're emailing principals to make sure that we have an SLP in every building, to make sure that they're compensated for this extra time that they'll be meeting with me, going through PDs and making sure that they're really championing the work. Because for me, at the end of everything we do as teachers, our job is for the students. And we want everyone to be on board with knowing that whether this might be a hindrance or scared or overwhelming or what might be the issue, is that let's try it. Let's do it with fidelity. Let's see the outcomes. And if the outcomes are great, we want to even increase them and make them better. Maybe there's something else we can do to increase that. If the outcomes are not great, we're going to assess that data and keep it moving. But I think the biggest thing here is the time, and the district has definitely offered the time. I think the implementation of the SLP ambassadors is really going to be key, especially when it comes to relaying this work in schools. They don't want to keep seeing my face. But when they have champions in their buildings who further understand the work, we've had small group discussions, we bring it out to the school, we're hoping that that'll be a success mark for the SLP plans.
Thanks so much, Jamila. And Principal Mosley, I just hope that we all hear the enthusiasm in the voices of our leaders and practitioners around this work. It's really, really exciting. All right, so we're going to quickly sort of wrap from there, knowing I want to certainly have time for questions, but just signaling up, as we have embraced these committee meetings, Commissioner McFadden, around wanting to return to R3 each time we come together, we're excited that next time we'll be talking more about some of our survey work and our stakeholder engagement work, and then highlighting again another aspects of our R3 work with emphasis this time around on virtual learning program and our acceleration work. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, comments, and again, appreciate the opportunity to share some of this exciting early implementation work.
Thank you all for the presentation of the information. Commissioner Reed, I see your hand, but before I get to that, I do just want to, Dr. Mosley and Ms. Ford, I'd just like to see your faces again. It's just really important for us to acknowledge the work that you all are doing. Number one, you rock stars. If you don't know that we're following you, and the work that you're doing at Glen Mount and the work that you're doing, Ms. Ford. And of course, I think I might follow you or see you on Twitter from time to time. So it's just actually good to see how you all are taking ownership of something that all of the team has come up with is what is most important for our young people, for our children, for our students. I was in a meeting with the CEO last night, and we were kind of talking about how this is, and don't kill me, Dr. Brooks, but how this is kind of like having an IEP in a sense for every one of our students, the way that we should be monitoring and developing individualized learning plans and implementing those plans throughout the course of a school year and even beyond. I think that's really important for us to focus on and consider as we're doing this acceleration work. It's really important. So Dr. Mosley, Ms. Ford, I just want to say thank you for being in this meeting. I know that it's extra, and certainly as a school-based person, this is something that is taking a little extra time, but I can tell how important this is to you all. And with that, I'm hoping and praying that the infectious spirit that you all have around this will grab hold to all of our principals and teachers within city schools. I also want to acknowledge, Ms. Ford, since you mentioned Sydney Thomas, we have another one, y'all. It's like almost every other year, we have some teachers that make it to that state teacher of the year place. So I just want to acknowledge Ms. Sydney Thomas, who is our city schools teacher of the year, who has made it as a finalist for the Maryland State Teacher Program. There's brilliance in Baltimore City, and I'm really excited to be a part of this work. So I wanted to acknowledge all of you, and certainly shout out Sydney Thomas. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you for saying your statement about IEPs for all, because I was trying to make the connection. Out of the box, Chief Jones mentioned the fact that, one, we have a big cadre of unfinished business. The other is we have attendance challenges, which are both are huge. And it looks like you said about the IEPs for all, going through the wellness module and going through the personalized learning module, are we working to give the kids what they need, but also making sure they're in the building while we give them what they need? Because we've seen the numbers going down. It doesn't look like we have anything embedded to take care of attendance. But is this a process by doing these, as Commissioner McFadden said, individualized IEPs for all students? Are we bringing up the wellness level? Are we bringing up the personalized learning level, wherein we bring up the unfinished educational business we work on, and we also work on the attendance business? Is this all connected? I'm asking.
I see Dr. Warren. Go ahead, Dr. Warren. I know you're going to talk about attendance.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Thank you for that question, Commissioner. So essentially, yes, you're right. It's all connected, and attendance, as we all know, is sort of a bellwether in a sense, right? It helps us often identify students who may be having challenges. So it can almost be both a cause and a consequence of students that are having different types of issues, whether it's mental health issues or maybe sometimes academic challenges that we haven't quite addressed, maybe external issues, family issues, bullying. Lots of things can be going on that are affecting attendance. And sometimes it's not the students. Sometimes it's more related to the family, maybe parents who are having trouble getting their younger child to school, for example. So we recognize the complexity of the attendance issue. We are absolutely prioritizing that this year. Actually, I was late. I apologize for being late to the call, but the reason was that we are now in our cycle where we do a daily meeting during the first 6 weeks or so of the school year, and we look at the attendance and enrollment and immunizations data every single day, and we work to take action on that at the district level. Meanwhile, we are working with schools and providing resources and support to them, and just continuing to encourage them to take quick action when they see an attendance issue. So that should be part of looking at a student's individualized plan, but also every school is required to have an attendance team, and that team is required to be looking at the attendance data continuously and taking action on both the individual and on the group and the school level. Happy to go into more details, but yes, just want to reinforce that we're very much focused on that.
Thank you. And certainly we know it all connects, right? It all aligns. So in order for us to have high quality instruction, our students have to feel safe, valued, and we've got to reach out to all of them to make sure that their holistic needs are met, right? It's heart before, I guess, the brain maybe, right? We've got to connect all of those pieces so that we can make sure that our young people are thriving in holistic environments. So thank you for that, Commissioner Reed. Was there anything else? Okay. I saw Commissioner Griffin's hand. Commissioner Griffin, hello, good afternoon.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Awesome. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Chair McFadden. I, just want to say great work on this presentation. It was very comprehensive and definitely encompassed a lot of the information I was looking for as far as where we are, what is the timeline for specific outcomes that we're looking to implement in schools, and how are we doing so far. I took a keen interest into the student plans. This reminds me a lot of what we used to do with the student-led conferences at Bliss, and how that information followed a student throughout the year in their advisory times. One thing I'm curious about, first, even before I say my curiosity, let me say thank you for the work that was done around this, because it was phenomenal. The inclusion of the stakeholders, students, parents, teachers, principals, into this processing of like what type of plan are we talking about, and what kind of information do we definitely need from our students, and how can we make sure we balance the burden of work, I think was just phenomenal. And I just want to make sure I give kudos for that. Thank you so much for your time and for being on the call. It was great to see some other folks on the call, Ms. Fort, and folks who were presenting about this, because we need to hear from our community members to make sure things are implemented properly. My curiosity is around, one, maybe I missed it, but where is this information housed? I'm thinking about the transference of, okay, student fills out their personalized plan in grade 3, and it's the end of their 3rd grade year, and now they're moving on to grade 4. How does grade 4 teachers see the progress of grade 3 and understand where to pick up? So that's one curiosity kind of wrapped into two. And the other thing I'm thinking about is the timing of doing these personalized plans. Completely understand why it's being done at the beginning of the school year this year, but is there a way to wrap this into possible end of year activities to have students think about the year coming, to do some goal setting for their next grade level, and have something comprehensive to pass on to their next teacher, next school, or what have you? So those are my two main questions at the moment.
Commissioner Griffin, I appreciate those questions. The second one I'm going to chew on, so I'm writing it down, and we will reflect on that. So thank you for that. With the first one, we're actually standing up a website for the student learning plans now. It'll be an internal website for staff to have all the information. Right now, they have access to a folder with all the information, but we want to put it on a website to make it a little easier. In terms of the long term, though, the plans will be uploaded to Infinite Campus, which is our student information system, well. And so as a result, the beauty of this is that there will be beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year plans for teachers to look at for their students who are coming in, right? So next year, no matter what school a student is in, the plan will follow the student, and a teacher will be able to go and see the conversations that they had in previous years, the About Me section in previous years, and it really will just be a rich way for us to know our students well, in addition to the in-person engagement that we do as we move throughout the coming years. So I appreciate that question, and we do want those plans to follow the students in a long-term way.
Dr. Mosley,
Wonderful. That's what I was hoping you would say.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Nope, I see Dr. Mosley and Ms. Ford. They turned their cameras on. I didn't know if you all had anything to add.
I wasn't sure if Dr. Pfeiffer was going to pop over to us, but I think that the ideas, and like I had said earlier, just like this is our first iteration, so these ideas about what can we do at the end of the year to prep, how can we further modify this to make it meaningful but almost easier but still meaningful. So like Dr. Pfeiffer said, that's continuously things that we are going to process, and then of course make those edits in there to help our teachers out.
Right, because the work's not going to stop. Thank you, Dr. Mosley. Right, the work doesn't just stop at developing a plan and looking at it, right? But it's how do we use this information, not just this year, but in years to come. So, really appreciate that. Commissioner Griffin, did you have anything else?
Just one more thing I was thinking about, and thank you so much, Ms. Ford and Dr. Mosley, for popping on. And I do appreciate that. No, this is probably an ongoing conversation. I'm excited about it. So that's why you hear me chiming in so much. I am thinking about the student support teams and how they are looped into the information here. And I was just curious if and what the plan is around that, or how schools are being supported to ensure that they are looping in student support teams with some of these student learning plans.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner Griffin, for that question, and thanks for giving me the platform. I can tell you that we've been tried and trued by every department in Baltimore City. We've partnered with and communicated with Family Community Engagement, MTSS, the Gifted Advanced Department, the Special Education Department, ITD. So all departments have truly vetted the student learning plan. But as far as relating to the student support team, one is that, and again, just trying to be as clear as possible, that though it may look or present itself as an IEP, it is not an IEP. So it's sort of just like two lanes going north and south, though the lanes don't cross. So it's not equivalent to an IEP. But the student support team has a different tier of supports. So this right here is just a plan. This right here can be an academic or a social emotional learning plan, but then the SST process will continue and support this plan with a tiered approach. And that tiered approach can go from tier 2 to tier 3 level supports. I hope that answered.
It absolutely did. That's what I was hoping you would say, because it's just a connection between this proactive work that's being done through the student learning plans to what happens when, okay, student has a need that is showing up. SST can come in with certain types of supports that they specifically provide. And I just think this is a beautiful way to literally make sure we capture all of our students and know them by name and by need from year to year. So, kudos and hand claps all around. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time. Dr. Dabrowski put a dream team together, and I hope we're doing well. So thank you.
Oh, we'll see at the end of the year, right? We'll see, right? But it with teamwork makes the dream work. So as long as the team is strong and focused on doing what is best for children, I'm sure that the outcomes will be positive. Chair Emeritus, I know that you've been waiting. So Commissioner Chinya, would you floor is yours.
Sure. I'm going to I always have to bring up the history that I bring, but I'm also going to bring a challenge to this. We've talked about individual education plans and student learning plans for a long time. I personally don't see a difference in what they become comprehensively. So my challenge would be that at some point it does become a plan, a single plan that we can pull for any of the things that might come in a student's life. And so if that plan then has to include accommodations, it will. If that plan needs to include the choice process, it will. But that we have one single plan that students and families and staff are all a part of, and not that a student could possibly end up with 3 or 4 plans on Infinite Campus. So that's my vision and my challenge that we do, because that would be what we've been talking about for a long time. That would be great. So that's the first part, and kudos to everything that's being done. And I just, Ms. Ford and Mr. Mosley, thank you for your work on the ground at the schools. The other question I have, and it was way back, unfortunately, in the presentation when we looked at the data, and I know we're doing beginning of the year data, but what if anything do we know right now about how the summer learning opportunities impacted the end of the year data that we've been presenting? Because I know I'm just thinking of the high school level alone, just the number of students that were able to make up credits to graduate was one of the highest we've had in many years. And I suspect that even the undergraduates made up some of that space. And I'm wondering if that made any difference in some of that data.
Yep, I'm not sure if Chief Jones wants to jump in, but I can certainly say so. Oh, I see you. Do you want to mention something, Teresa?
Oh, you can go ahead and I'll build from there. That's fine.
Our testing windows have just opened, so we will be looking very closely to see where we hope, right, we'll see some impact. We know we served more students than in previous summers, and that we had a whole lot of academic focus in our enrichment program. So we had some really thoughtful and intentional tutoring. So we are hopeful that we will reap the benefits of that work. And as we look at our fall Amplify and our iReady, that's what I think what we'll be seeing. But your space around, because we got a reimagined approach to our credit recovery and moved into multiple sessions and allowed students to take more opportunities, and our kids showed up and were there, we were really, really excited by that progress. So we're hopeful that we're going to see that impact as well. But go ahead, Chief Jones.
Yeah, I was just going to build on what you said. Is like, certainly as we've been looking at the data, we are seeing where summer has made a difference. So to Commissioner Chinia's point, to be able to get more students across the finish line for graduation, that has been one of the results. In addition to that, for students that did have that unfinished learning, to give themselves a little bit of a head start coming into the upcoming school year. So all of that will also be reflected in future updates. But I do just want to acknowledge like the work that the summer learning team put into creating more opportunities for students was noteworthy. In some instances, our demand exceeded our expectations coming in. And I think that also just reflects the level of commitment that our families and students have to recovery. And so I'm also optimistic that as we go into the use of these personalized learning plans, that this will create agency in ways that, maybe it wasn't expressed previously. So I do think that you'll see a sense of that even reflected in those plans themselves, because of course students want to get credit, loosely credit for the fact that they participated in those summer learning opportunities. And I am, again, keeping my fingers crossed that when we see the beginning of year data, we will see some improvements that we don't historically see, because we've had a greater level of engagement during the summer period than we typically see historically.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to be certain that we acknowledge that, because even, just talking with students as well as some teachers who were participating, it was amazing the number of students. And then my last thing is just, it's been fun as a grandmom to just watch the process with the student learning plans, listening to my children who I know talk to their parents, but to really talk through some of the questions about me and discuss with their parents what they feel about their own learning styles and things. So again, kudos and thanks for the work that's been done.
Thank you, Chair Emeritus. My final question is just going, as we focus on acceleration, how does our curriculum currently reflect time for acceleration? For example, are there suggestions for units that discuss places where or suggestions for acceleration within those units? Does that exist? And is that something that we're working towards standardizing across content areas in the system?
Yep, no, great question. So what I would say is the content areas have some areas where there's consistency and then there's some differences. So let me start with an area of like mathematics, where we do really have some clear guidance on what are the most prioritized standards and how our curriculum attends to that very closely and carefully. So there's a really nice flow for the acceleration model in math. Similarly, we're working closely with some of our partners, iReady, Wit and Wisdom, to help us with Wit and Wisdom, which is a knowledge-based curriculum, a little bit different than sort of your sequence of literacy skills and strategies. And yet we're able to make those connections, and we're doing some deep work around, again, matching up those most important strategies, most important standards with where it's in the curriculum, and then making modifications about where we spend more time and where we spend less time. So this is the work that's happening. And so we are in a space where we're working on this alongside our teachers who are living it, because for the teachers to be able to tell us what's working, where they need more time or less time, that's the sort of development space that we're in as we're in this implementation. But I'm really excited about where our ELA math, and then when I talk about science and social studies, there's also momentum there, but it's a little bit different because it's often topic driven. And so what acceleration looks like in our science and social studies curricula is different. However, we have been working closely with Dr. David Steiner at Johns Hopkins to really help us think about how do we make those adjustments in our science to make sure that we're hitting those key science understandings. And similarly, in the discipline of history and social studies, those key kinds of thinking of and behaviors that carry across content areas and topics. So I think I'm excited that we're going to be able to jump into it at our next presentation more in depth with you, because it's really complex work, it's exciting work, and we are really digging into it and rolling our sleeves up to get at it. And in some places, we've got a lot of forward progress. In other places, we're going to start a little bit slower, but we're going to stick with it, which I think is the commitment around this academic recovery.
I appreciate that, and certainly we look forward to what we'll hear at the next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting around acceleration and the virtual learning plan and how it's all embedded. I appreciate that. And then finally, I just want to charge everyone, especially on this call, as we're beginning as commissioners to make visits to schools. I think that it will be crucially important for us to have R3 look-fors as we're visiting schools, right? So that our time is spent in the most efficient way and aligned to the work that is happening. Just like what I think is great to see in these procurement letters is how anticipated purchases directly align to our priorities. I just love seeing that alignment, and I love seeing how that has been written in these particular procurement letters. So we should also be able to align with those priorities, the work of the R3 happening as we're going into schools. We should be able to see it. For example, if we are into this restoration focus, right? What does customer service look like when we come into a building, right? And not just when we come into a building, but when parents, family members, community members come into the building, are we actually doing what we say we're going to do? For example, even with the learning plans, I know that either Commissioner Griffin maybe or Commissioner Brooks has mentioned, as we visit some of these schools, perhaps even sitting with the teacher or maybe a school leader and pulling one of those student learning plans to actually go through them with the staff there so that we can actually see some of that in action. I think that will be helpful for us as we're making these visits in our schools, because we want to just make sure our work is aligned to what is best for our children right now. But certainly thank you all for the incredible and tiresome work that everyone is doing. I know that this is heavy lifting, but I also know that this is what is right for our students, our families, and our community. So together we're going to get through this, everyone. So thank you all for the presentation. Thanks for the great work. Thank you, Chief. And we are now ready for procurement.
Good afternoon. There are 4 items on the procurement agenda this afternoon. The first one is from the Chief Academic Officer. It's for Reading Partners. They are a literacy tutoring program. The contract is for a 3-year term for a total estimated amount of $6 million. And this was a respondent to one of our PQS processes. The next item on the agenda is also from the Chief Academic Officer. It is for Discovery Education, which is a learning platform. It is a 3-year contract with an estimated annual contract amount of $1.5 million. The fourth item on the agenda is from the Chief Achievement and Accountability Officer. It is an extension to our contract with NCS Pearson for a total amount of $401,490 for a single year extension. And the final item on the agenda is from the Chief of Schools Office. It is a piggyback contract from the National IPA that has been competitively solicited with BSN Sports and US Games, and the contract provides physical education and recreational products, team uniforms, those types of things that are for either PE or athletics. The estimated annual amount is $2.5 million, and it is a initial term from this year until 2023 with 2 1-year renewal options. Are there any questions?
Jessica, thank you so much for your leadership and for your work. And I really appreciate the alignment to our priorities that's been placed in each of these. Commissioners, colleagues, are there any questions about any of the items that are on our procurement agenda today?
I think I may have read it, but what's the funding source for the Reading Partners?
So that one's going to have a variety of sources. That's going to include funds from general funds and grants, and may include central office spend and some school spend, depending on how each individual school either fits it within their budget or is part of a centralized plan.
Okay, so I guess when you decide you need to spend the money, then you can discern where you get the money from. That's what you're saying?
Some of it is availability of funds when we're thinking about the schools that plan from year to year for their school budgets. This one in particular, because of it overlap with tutoring and some of the centralized planning, there have been funds identified in the ESSER funds to support the work. I'm not exactly sure how much of it will go to this particular vendor, but we do have funds set aside for that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
Folks, we've come to the end of our agenda today. I want to just say thank you again to my colleagues for coming so prepared, as we've been able to have some really great discussion and dialogue today. Kudos to the staff for all of the tiresome, but very important work that you all are leading and lifting. I don't know, Commissioner, what is that, Commissioner Reed? You're still muted. Unmute.
It's a mailing that I got that shows one of our commissioners getting a OSI Community Fellowship last year.
Who is that commissioner, Commissioner Reed?
She knows. Commissioner Griffin.
It's me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
She's one of the stars for OSI last year.
Awesome. Baltimore City has some rock stars here. I think Baltimore City is the greatest place, one of the greatest places in the world. And certainly our school system is really on the up and up, right? Because of all of the work that everyone is doing and everyone is leading for the sake of our students and our children in our community. So thanks to everyone. And it's important that we all stay balanced as well. So as much as we work, it's important that we take time for ourselves so that we are our best selves for the really important work that we have to do for our young people. Our next meeting is October the 5th. It is a Tuesday. I appreciate everyone's flexibility for changing our original Tuesday meeting to a Thursday to accommodate holidays and a bunch of things. So our next meeting is October 5th, where we will be focusing on everything that we just talked about that we just saw in the R3 plan, the virtual learning program and acceleration. And I'm not sure if we're also going to hear a little bit about the Gifted and Learning and AP expansion program. But that is listed on our agenda. And then we'll have a home and hospital update. Is there anything else for the good of the group? Folks, enjoy your evening. Have a great evening. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. And we will see you all next week at our board meeting on Tuesday. Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much. Good night.
Thank you. Goodbye.